speaking on the Farz platform for quite some time, and no doubt that it's a very wonderful platform to interact with a lot of people from very different fields who are either preparing for EDIC or for MRCP or for any other competitive exam. And for those who are preparing in such competitive exams, it is needless to emphasize that ethics, end of life care, and brain dead, this section has been divided, and it has composed of these three components, that it is increasingly becoming important more and more. A decade ago, it was not considered to be that important, but with passage of time, because of renewed interests and because of its widespread implications, it is becoming an important subject. And therefore, for trainees also, it would be reasonably and logically correct to expect a few questions, because all the questions definitely the questions will be few from these aspects in comparison to the core subjects. But whatever questions are there, there will be sitter questions. That is, if you miss answering or if you wrongly answer a question, your rank or percentile may slip down several folds. So anyways, so these are very subjects which carries a lot of inherent concept is very important. And therefore, we have to realize that once we develop or garner that concept, then it is not at all difficult to understand the questions and select the proper response. Now, why is medical ethics important? Medical ethics is important because it provides a framework. And that framework is essential to make a judgmental call on what is right when we face some moral questions or ethical dilemmas in our work. Now, moral questions and ethical dilemmas are very common in critical care. We have all experienced it, that some patients, they go slow, that this patient is not going to recover, don't step up vasopressors, or in extreme cases, don't put this patient on ventilator. Now, these are all ethical dilemmas because there are two opposing or two conflicting views. One, not to try best to be patient's recovery, and another is to stop interfering too much. So there are various ethical dilemmas that we come across in our work. And whenever we have to take a call to make our best judgment in the face of such dilemmas, we will have to follow the medical ethics or principles of medical ethics. Secondly, it provides standards in the professional relationship between physician and their patients. Patient-physician relationship is built upon trust and faith, and also on various other factors. But one has to be even if one follows the ethics, then also there may be inadequate physician-patient relationship. But if one does not follow ethics, then there will be definitely this physician-patient relationship will be strained. Therefore, it is very important that it guides in creating or sustaining a good physician-patient relationship. Third, it is very important in medical research besides medical practice, because in medical research, we will come and see that during Second World War, there were a lot of violations, and the war prisoners, where a lot of experimental research was conducted without their consent, and some dangerous researches were performed. And these were, again, they were all convicted, those physicians, doctors, post Second World War. And from then it became essential to follow ethics during medical research. And of course, it is very important because it provides privacy, confidentiality, and truthfulness in the doctor-patient relationship. This is also very vital because in our fraternity, the social obligations of a physician are much more than any other profession. And unless this doctor is able to maintain this privacy, confidentiality, and truthfulness, then this distortion of the image becomes unequivocal for the entire community, not just for a single person. And everywhere, medical council has guidelines for erring doctors when they're practicing the field of medicine. So this is the importance of medical ethics. So if you follow these principles, then you can understand that if any question comes, you can easily understand that these are the factors that you should keep in mind. It is important to know that there are 4 pillars of medical ethics. These pillars are very important. One is autonomy. So this autonomy means respect for patient as an individual and respect his or her decision. Beneficence. Beneficence is do only what is good for the patient. Third is non-maleficence. Don't do anything which is bad or contrary to the benefit. And justice, treat everyone equally and within the law. So you can call it justice, or sometimes it is called equity and justice. Whatever it is the same. So these are the 4 pillars of medical ethics. And one can only say that one is ethical if he conforms to the principles of all these 4 pillars. Any violation or any deviation from any one of these pillars can render your services ethically incorrect or wrong. So these 4 principles represent a framework for analyzing the best possible intention in a given situation, or a best option in a given situation. Now let us see those pillars in a broader way. Autonomy is the freedom of the patients to make their decisions and on the conditions without interference, pressurization, and duress. So suppose if the patients knows everything, understand everything, it is important that we should convey him the various options that are available considering his disease. If we need to give him certain drugs, there are both oral and injectable forms. We can tell him that these are the various forms available, but ultimate decision whether to take or whether to accept is with the patient. So patients should be counseled in simple language so that they understand the risks and benefits of the procedure. This pertains to intervention, that if you want to put a drain, if you want to put a surgery, then the patient should be counseled and consent should be taken, because it is his decision, it is his body, it is his way that we are doing upon. And both the risks and benefits should be proceeded, and then only the patients can be requested to give their consent or asked to know their opinion. Physician should provide all the available therapeutic options that is available to the client at that particular place. Of course, one which are not available in his place of work, but are available in the adjacent place, that also should be offered, because that is important. And patient, even after all the counseling, has the right to refuse and reject treatment. Therefore, there should not be any pressure on the patient that whatever way he cannot refuse one of the options and it has to be treated. So the doctor is not expected to impose any decision on the patient. So this is all about autonomy. Second is beneficence. Beneficence means that everything which is done by the physician should be in the best interest of the patients. Therefore, something which is not causing any benefit or is unlikely to cause benefit should not be kept on the platter of options before the patient. The patient should not be offered such choices which are less likely to be of benefit or unlikely to cause any benefit. This ethical principle is implemented particularly in the choice of drugs, because all medications have some adverse effects, some of which may be mild, which can be tolerated, some of which are severe, which can worsen the clinical state, some of which can also cause death. So therefore, it is important that of this, one which is most likely to be beneficial to the patient, one which is the ones which should be kept in the choice. It should not be that the patient should be given every choice of all the list that is available. Third is non-maleficence. Non-maleficence means that no harm should be done to the patient or other people in the community. So when we talk about negligence, negligence is often a consequence of the violation of non-maleficence. And medical error can also lead to non-maleficence. So anything which is causing harm is non-maleficence. Therefore, one should be particularly careful that in the therapeutic realm, one does not impose any treatment that has more likelihood of causing harm. And this applies to research also, because wherein the research protocol must be reviewed by institutional review board, so that none of the research participants suffer any harm for participating in the research. So this is also a very important aspect and one important pillar. The fourth, as I said, is justice. Justice requires fairness in the management of patients and distribution of resources, especially in the time of scarcity. Because when priority needs to be maintained, suppose you have limited resources, you have more number of patients, in that cases, you have to be equitably distribute whatever limited resources you have and ensure that one who needs it most gets it, one who is less likely to be benefited, or even who is less in need does not get it. So there should be justice. The distribution of health resources requires justice, which should be done fairly. And in times of scarcity, this principle of justice is required to determine areas of priority. So individuals at all times should be fairly treated when they visit a health facility. So these are the four pillars. But in addition to that, there are two more aspects which some people say that are additionally important. Some people include them or club them under autonomy. One is confidentiality. Confidentiality means the physician requires permission and consent of the patient before divulging such information to any other person, even their fellow physicians and healthcare professionals. So whatever one has come to know during the treatment of a patient should be entirely restricted to himself or herself and should not be shared by for any reason whatsoever without proper permission or without consent of the patient. So the issue of confidentiality is also maintained even after the death of the patient. That the patient has now expired and one can share it, it is wrong medically, in terms of medical ethics. Even if the patient has passed away, his informations which he before death considered as confidential cannot be shared. Sometimes the ethical principle of confidentiality is breached when the medical information is required by a court of law, or the illness is a threat or will be harmful to others in the public. For example, during pandemic, etc. So in those cases, this confidentiality can be breached. Otherwise, it is ethical and legally binding on the doctors to respect patients' confidentiality at all possible situations, in all possible contexts. The other thing is truthfulness. That is also a part of autonomy according to some, where some consider it separately, that where the physician is expected at all times to tell the patient the truth about their clinical conditions. But there are certain exceptions because some cultures and religions forbid the patient being told the truth when it is a bad news. But most importantly, it is important from the medical ethics says that the patient needs to be sensitized. And once the patient is sensitized and once he becomes receptive for such information, even if it is bad, then the same needs to be conveyed to the patient in real terms without hiding anything. But despite all challenges and ethical as issues associated with truth telling, it is always right for the patient to be told the truth, which he needs to know later. So let us see some of the ethical dilemmas. Now, one is the end of life. End of life is a topic and phenomenon that has been debated for several decades, that when should end of life be started? When should end of life be considered? So there is a lot of debate on it, and there are certain accepted principles on end of life. We will discuss it later on. But before that, we'll see that what are the other dilemmas. Ethical dilemma is also there when telemedicine is used, because during the pandemic times, a lot of patients' consultations were performed in telemedicine, but because of conflict in productivity and patient confidentiality, which cannot be obtained. So this is an important dilemma, that what form of counseling should be offered and how much it should be acceptable, and when it should be a line should be drawn for telemedicine. Confidentiality is not maintained during COVID-19 testing in order to protect the public. We have all seen that. So whether it is COVID-19, whether in any disease, where it is important that to make known in order to protect the larger part of the community, then it is. So this is also an ethical dilemma, although there is clear-cut. But similar situations may arise in lesser threats when it may produce a dilemma, and then it becomes important to follow the ethics. There is ethical dilemma about whether the patient or the client should be informed when medical errors occur. Some people say that it is important even when the medical error has not caused any harm to the patients should be informed because some error has occurs, whereas some say that unless it is the harm has caused, there is no need to reveal. So this is also some kind of dilemma, and one need to be cautious about it. And of course, ethical dilemma is also encountered when dealing with do not resuscitate order, because do not resuscitate order, patients, if not giving, their surrogate or relatives are giving. So what is the relation between his surrogate and the patient? So all this, whether he is a true surrogate, so all these things can lead to ethical dilemma. So these are some of the ethical dilemmas in which we will have to follow the principles of medical ethics. The other important thing is the ethical considerations in conducting medical research. So we have told that the first principles which were developed, which came, was the Nuremberg Code, and that gave a set of 10 ethical principles that guides research involving human experimentation. And this was the fallout of Second World War, when the violation was at its extreme. So much of violation occurred. Even healthy people were given so much of toxic drugs, and it was all concealed. The facts emerged out in a huge blundern at the end of the Second World War, and all those who were involved in the research were put under trial. So from there, because it was called the Nuremberg trial, then it became the Nuremberg Code. Now, this code emphasized 4 basic ethical principles of research, which are informed consent, beneficence, non-maleficence, and non-coercion. Informed consent, in that autonomy is the informed consent. It's slightly changed. So the patient has to give a written informed consent that he is willing to participate or act as a subject for the research. Beneficence and non-maleficence are same as it is for the others. And non-coercion, that is, the patient, if they refuse to be a subject in the study, their routine, they should not be subjected to any form of mistreatment. That is, their therapeutic case should not be compromised, to which that is their right. So there's no coercive action should be there against them from the physician. So non-coercion is that portion. So this Nuremberg Code is still widely regarded as the most important document in the history of medical research. There has been a lot of changes. After the Nuremberg, the Belmont came, and then the World Federation took up. It has been again revisited again and again, modified, and newer versions have come in. Almost every time it is modified and it is followed. So it is a part it is always depicted in the WHO ethical code. If you go to the WHO website, in the ethics section, the latest version is always available. So over the years, many countries have formulated and enacted upon it, and the laws guiding the ethical conduct of medical research has been put into place. And in India also, we have seen that the ICMR has come out with its guidelines in the 2019 and 2017, and in 2019 it was modified. Before that, there were some guidelines, but these were not so strict, but now it is very strict, and I will come to end at the last. But you see the historical events that took place in during the evolution of ethics in clinical research. Even before this Second World War, the syphilis study began. The problem was that even though penicillin was available, some patients were denied the standard of care, which was penicillin that time, to see whether the neurosyphilis develops in all the patients or whether this neurosyphilis develops in some patients, and whether they can progress and cured on their own. So this denial of treatment, even when it was available, was a crime which was committed even before the Nuremberg Code took place. But this got exposed in 1972. This continued for almost 40 years. It got exposed, and the Belmont report in 1979 made its recommendation thereafter. So this is also something which we know that is important. Then ethical considerations in conducting research in public health emergencies. Public emergencies are tragic periods in which a lot of social, political, and the medical field, all the structures get affected. And during public health emergencies, medical research are conducted either to solve the problems that are associated with this emergency, or certain problems that are not directly due to this emergency, but related to this emergency. So medical research should be conducted only if it does not impede the emergency response efforts. So the emergency care is of primary importance, and no research should be or is of that importance that it can impede emergency response. So that is important.